Chapter 9. They're coming. Once that word left Randolph's lips, all of them started growling at the wolf's direction, except for Bethany and Sebastian. Even though they didn't know what the word rogue represents, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out that they were bad guys. Then they heard a low chuckle. Then from the shadows, a pale man with auburn hair, face adorning a smirk, walked out.
What lovely wolves we have here. Oh, look, the children of the prophecy. Bethany, you're up. Who? Incoming!
The person said. Grayson growled and shifted back into his human form, Quinn shifting her body to shield his naked body.
Ah, King Grayson, what a pleasure to meet you,
The person said and bowed mockingly.
Couldn't say the same to you.
Grayson snarled at the intruder.
Enough stalling.
Randolph said once he shifted back. Bethany too shifted her body to cover him. Randolph patted her flank as thanks.
State who you are and why are you in my territory.
Randolph sniffed the air and growled.
Vampire.
He spat.
Ah, you got a good nose, young Alpha. But yes, I am indeed a vampire.
The vampire said, and his eyes flashed red. Then the vampire turned his attention to Bethany and Sebastian.
Bethany and Sebastian, it seems you two have already achieved your wolves. Congrats.
The vampire applauded.
Enough!
Grayson's voice boomed. For a minute, all was silent. Even the rogues stopped growling. The vampire clicked his tongue.
Don't be hasty. One command and you'll be dead. What do you want?
Randolph asked.
To take the children of the prophecy, of course.
The vampire smiled. Then it turned into something sinister.
Kill the rest,
He said, and melted into the shadows. The rogues growled and charged at them. Randolph and Grayson shifted back. Randolph growled very loudly, then charged at the rogues, the rest right beside him. Bethany ran towards the nearest rogue and bit onto its front leg, hard. The rogue growled, thrashing around, trying to free his leg. Bethany released its leg when the rogue managed to knock his head against hers. Bethany spat out the rogue's blood, mentally gagging at the taste. The rogue growled and charged at Bethany. Quite fast, despite the injured leg. Bethany mentally smirked at that and gave herself a pat on the back. She's doing quite well, despite doing this for the first time. Bethany dodged the rogue when he was close enough, but he managed to nick her back with his claws. Bethany growled and slashed her claws at his flank. The rogue went down. Bethany's eyes widened when he just stood up and shook his head, snarling at Bethany. I was sure he took quite a blow from me. How is he still able to stand up? It's like he's a zombie. Bethany's thought was broken when the rogue charged at her again. Bethany managed to dodge it, making him smashed into a tree. Again, the rogue just stood up like he's not even in pain. Weird. Bethany quickly jumped onto him before he started charging at her again, and bit onto his neck, ripping off a chunk of meat. The rogue did whimper in pain this time and fell onto the ground. He shifted back into his human form and looked at Bethany. Bethany furrowed her brow when she saw his eyes. It was like he was fighting against something mentally. It flicked from red to brown continuously until it finally settled on brown and his face softens. He turned to look at Bethany. He smiled.
Thank you,
He whispered before the light leaves his eyes. What the hell? Charlotte said. Before Bethany had time to ponder on what just happened, a rogue pounced on her and snapped his jaws at her. She uses her hind legs to kick him towards a tree. The rogue jumped up, snarling, which she gladly gave back to him. He growled and charged at her. She tried sinking her teeth into his neck, but he's faster than the previous one. He quickly dodged him, but he managed to damage my back with claw marks. Now her blood's oozing out. Bethany whimpered in pain and snarled at him. Bethany clawed and bit the rogue, then finally, she managed to use her teeth to bite onto his neck and bit out a chunk of meat. Same as the other one. He did shift back, but this one didn't look pleased. He glared at her until he passed away. Again. What the hell? Charlotte exclaimed.
Bethany!
She turned and saw Sebastian jogging towards her. Then they heard a loud growl coming from Grayson's side. They nodded and ran towards Grayson's side. They arrived at Grayson back in his human form, pinning a bloody, naked man. Bethany realized that everyone else was there, still in their wolf form, snarling at the pinned man.
Who sent you?
Grayson's voice boomed. The man only chuckled darkly. Then his face changed, softened, less evil, even sad. There it is again, Charlotte said to me. Then the man started sobbing.
The hell? Shit keeps getting weirder and weirder. They are coming.
That's what he said before he slashed his own throat and went immobile.
The fuck?
Sebastian said to me mentally.
Let's get back first.
Grayson said and shifted back, leading the way back. Unfortunately for Bethany, she managed to take one step before collapsing. Randolph turned and ran towards me. He shifted back and gasped.
Shit! You are injured!
He said and knelt beside her, checking her back, gently touching it. Bethany winced and dug her claws into the ground.
Shit, she's bleeding too fast. If this keeps on going, she's going to have anemia.
Grayson shifted back and checked the wound himself. Quick, I just informed Mum to wait at the entrance of the forest. Get her onto Sebastian's back and let's go, she said as she hovered around them. Sebastian bends down for Randolph and Grayson to place Bethany onto his back. Sebastian whined and licked at Bethany's paw closest to him.
It's gonna be all right,
Randolph said, patting Bethany's head. Then both of them shifting back and they all rushed off.
Stay awake, Beth.
Sebastian whispered before Bethany blacked out. When they arrived at the entrance, a handful of pack members were waiting for them. They gasped when they saw Bethany. Oh my, what happened? Someone from the pack said. Quick, bring her inside. Emma rushed to them with blankets. Sebastian stayed in his wolf form and carried her to one of the rooms in the house. Randolph and Grayson, who had shifted back, carried Bethany from Sebastian's back onto a bed.
She's out cold. Where's the pack doctor?
Sean growled. We called her, but she's out of the territory. She was restocking the medicine when we called. Shit. I can help. They all turned and saw Quinn with her hand raised. How? I was the pack doctor before we were attacked. Learned everything from the previous one before she passed away because of old age. Sean nodded at Randolph.
Her old pack was renowned to be masters at medical.
Randolph nodded back.
Quick! Bring all the supplies from the medical center. Yes, Alpha!
Please do anything you can to save her, Emma said and grabbed Quinn's hand tightly. I will, Quinn said. Then she turned to Ramona. You have an elastic band? Ramona ran out and came back in with an elastic band. Thanks, Quinn said and tied up her head. She put on some clean gloves. All right, out. Can't work with all of you hovering, Quinn said with a stern look. Come on, she's in good hands, Emma said and ushered all of them out. Quinn turned back to Bethany. She crouched down and whispered, Bethany? Bethany, you hear me? Quinn nudged her a few more times before Bethany gained back consciousness. Bethany whimpered. Bethany, you hear me? When she got a nod, she smiled. Bethany, I need you to shift back. I can't patch you up in wolf form. Just imagine your human form and shifted. Bethany nodded, and in no time she's back in her human form, but passed out again from the pain. Shifting from wolf to human is easier, but no less painful. Quinn quickly placed a clean cloth to stop the bleeding as much as she could, lifting it from time to check the wound. Quinn concluded that Bethany needed stitching, so she told the helper of the pack doctor to bring the equipment she needs. After everything was prepared, Quinn started patching Bethany up. Outside the door, everyone was waiting for some news. Randolph was pacing around, making the rest quite dizzy. Randolph, come to sit down. You're making me dizzy, Emma said, rubbing her forehead.
Sorry, Mum. Just worried.
It's gonna be fine. They turned and looked at a now human Sebastian, who spoke. Sebastian turned his head slightly to look at them. He smiled tiredly.
She's a strong girl.
Randolph smiled and nodded.
That she is. Even if she's not, I'll follow her and bring her back just to kill her myself.
Sebastian said with a pout and crossed his arms. The rest left. They all stood up when the door opened, revealing Quinn taking off her gloves covered in blood.
How is she?
Randolph asked. Quinn smiled. She's fine. She only needed some stitching, thankfully. With no hard activities, she'll be back to herself in a week. The rest sighed in relief. Sebastian walked to her and hugged her.
Thank you.
Quinn smiled and returned the hug. You guys saved my life. Is the least I could do. Let me place bandages on her, then you can move her to a more comfortable place. Sebastian nodded, and Quinn walked back in. Randolph sighed in relief as he sat down, but then he shot up. What the hell? They all heard and rushed into the room.
What's wrong?
Quinn shook her head. I was going to place bandages on her, but then I saw this. They turned to where Quinn was pointing and saw Bethany's back.
There's nothing wrong to it,
Sebastian said as he furrowed his brow. That's the thing, I just stitched her up. There should be a scar from that. Now it's...
Perfectly fine.
Randolph breathed out, touching the smooth skin where Quinn just stitched with needle and thread. There wasn't any bump or scar.
How is that possible?
Sebastian asked. You don't know? Ramona asked. Sebastian shook his head.
This never happened before. It usually took a week or more for her wounds to heal.
They all looked at Grayson, who was more of an expert on red wolves. Grayson ignored them for a second, went to examine Bethany's wound. All of a sudden, he sighed.
Thank God.
He whispered.
What?
Randolph asked. Grayson chuckled, pleasantly surprised.
She inherits our grandmother's ability.
What's that? Ramona asked.
Healing.
He said simply and placed the blanket back to cover Bethany's naked body. I still don't get it, Ramona said.
It means that she has the abilities to heal faster than any wolf, including me and Sebastian.
Grayson explained.
Just like Grandma. Our grandma always has the abilities to heal faster than any wolf. That's why everyone calls her Immortalibus Regina.
The Immortal Queen, someone said from behind them. They all spun around, except Sebastian, and saw a young lady they didn't recognize.
Who are you?
Randolph asked, alpha mode on. He tried sniffing her scent, but ends up with nothing. The lady has no scent at all. I meant no harm, Alpha Randolph. When she said those few words, Sebastian whipped his head around, and a grin broke on his face.
Madame Penelope,
He said, and hugged the lady whose name is Penelope. They heard a growl and saw Ramona pouting, which was quite cute.
Don't growl at her, Ramona. You're my mate. You know that it'll always be that way. Plus, she's way older than me.
Sebastian said, and went to Ramona's side and snaked his hand around her waist. Ramona apologized at the lady and grinned up at Sebastian. It's fine, and yeah, I'm way older than him, Penelope said. How old? Ramona asked. Let's just say a few 100 years, Penelope said and smiled.
What?
They all shouted, except Sebastian and Grayson. Shh, you'll wake Bethany up. Come, we'll talk outside, she said. And once they're all outside and she closed the door, she looked at us and smiled. I'm a sorceress, she simply said.
Yeah, a one that lived for hundreds of years. Is that even possible?
Randolph asked. Oh, why, of course. There are many more who lived longer than me. Sorceress or sorcerer are immortals, if we don't get killed, that is, which is quite hard for us since we get killed. A lot.
What about you?
Randolph asked. Oh no, not me. Only the ones that use their powers to fight and kill will die a lot faster. The ones like me that use our powers to heal don't. Some still do, though, sadly, she said. We all nodded.
Have we met before?
Grayson asked after a while. Yes, we did, young Grayson. You just don't remember. It's been so long, Penelope said.
Says the one who can live forever.
Sebastian joked, which earned a nudge at the gut from Ramona, hard. Grayson thought for a while, then his eyes widened.
You were there when Mom gave birth to Sebastian and Bethany.
He said. Correct, Penelope said with a smile. Your mom almost died while giving birth to the twins. Luckily, I was there to support her, she said with nostalgia. I'll tell you more, but first, can we find some place to sit and have a good cup of tea? Penelope asked. I'm famished.
Sure, let's go to the
Randolph
kitchen then.
said, and they followed him to the kitchen.